Pat Forde of Yahoo Sports joining me now here on the program. How are you, Pat?
I'm great, Rich. Happy rivalry week in college football to you.
Thank you. Same to you here on the Honda Insider Report. Pat Forde joining me here. So let's get right to it. I think you heard what I was saying, and I was retweeting some of your columns on this, and we went back and forth on Twitter. 18 playoff, get rid of the conference championships. Is that anywhere possible, do you think?
I wish it were. I mean, I would love to get rid of the conference championship games. They stink. Although I can tell you a scenario by which Florida wins the SEC title game and goes to the playoff. So that one, that's at least a shred of possibility out there in addition to Alabama going.
Well, then how does that happen? How does that happen?
Okay. You close the season by beating LSU in Baton Rouge, Florida State in Tallahassee, and Alabama, you slay the dragon. You beat the undefeated team, the team that everybody's convinced is by far the best out there, and suddenly you vault to the head of the two-loss pecking order. You're sitting there at 11-2 and saying, nobody's got a better win than us. Why aren't we in the playoffs? So you would go ahead of Wisconsin, you'd go ahead of Oklahoma, you'd go ahead of Penn State if it comes to that. You'd still need help, but it could happen.
Okay. So there's no shot, though, of an 18 playoff? Why not? What's standing in the way of this? TV?
Yeah, I wish. The two things in the way are, one, the academicians, because you would probably have to play that extra round during finals or something very near to that. And then secondly, the coaches hate it. I mean, the coaches, if you talk to Urban Meyer or some of the other coaches that have played all the way through a playoff, they're like, man, we are on fumes. We've played 15 games. We can't go another week. So that would be the resistance to it. I would love to see the eradication of the conference championship games, even though it would mean less money for people, and the addition of another layer of playoff. To me, 6, I would like 6. We talked about it a little bit. I would love to see 2 teams get a bye and then 4 teams play, and the first round's on campus sites, and the 2 winners of that then go to play the semifinals against the teams that got byes. But it's fighting a lot of resistance.
Pat Forde, Honda Insider Report from Yahoo Sports, joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. So from what you're hearing about what is being spoken behind these closed doors to decide who's in the college football playoff rankings and where, what is the criteria that you're hearing about that's being discussed?
Well, obviously, strength of schedule has been big. That's why Washington, with 1 loss, is the one team out, because they don't have the schedule strength of the other teams ahead of them. But they've been trying to figure out a way to stratify, thinking we could end up with a 2-loss team, and that's where I think strength of record helps Wisconsin there. Head-to-head gets tricky. It gets thorny if you're looking at Penn State and Ohio State. The thing that the differentiator there is they don't have the same record. Penn State's lost twice, Ohio State's lost once, even though you could well end up with Penn State owning the head-to-head over Ohio State and owning the league championship and still being left out at the behest of the Buckeyes.
Well, I mean, what about being left out at the behest of Michigan? Even if Penn State goes to the conference championship and beats Wisconsin, Michigan still would have the same number of losses as Penn State, and Michigan beat Penn State.
Yeah, by a mere 39 points.
So, I mean, these are all things, I guess, that are down the road. And then you've got Oklahoma sitting there at 9-2. If they could be 10-2 beating Oklahoma State, I mean, their 2 losses would be to Houston, which, as we know, has beaten some quality teams, and the other one to Ohio State.
Yeah, but it was a 10-point loss to Houston. It was a 21-point loss at home to Ohio State. And they don't have any good wins, in my opinion. See, the Big 12 is the absolute Ponzi scheme out there this year. They firmly established in September that conference was the weakest of the 5 by far. They beat nobody whatsoever. So then they get into games against each other, start beating each other, and everybody says, "Oh, look at Oklahoma, they're good." No, they're just beating bad teams. Well, their offense is good. Yeah, they're playing against Big 12 defenses. So that's been a complete scam. I think that Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are really even in the conversation.
Pat Forde joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. Well, I'm a Big Ten guy, but couldn't you say the same thing about the Big Ten? I mean, who is Penn State, with all due respect to my colleague across the way, and Wisconsin beaten? I mean, Wisconsin did beat LSU. That's a good one. I mean, who is and Michigan? I mean, Michigan beat Colorado at home, which is turning into a nice quality win That's a feather in their cap right now.
Absolutely. That's become a better and better win as the season's gone along. And you will say Ohio State did beat Oklahoma by 21. Now, I'm firmly of the belief that beating the Big 12 teams is not that big a deal, but it is a 21-point win over a team that other people seem to rank very highly. Penn State's bargaining chip is beating Ohio State, so that is within conference. But I think the Big Ten did enough non-conference to show it's a legitimate conference. Certainly, I think the Big Ten's been the best conference this year pretty handily.
And how strong of a case does USC have?
It's tough. You have to convince the committee that hot now matters more than complete body of work. And that kind of goes against what they have done the last couple of years and so far what they have done this year. But if they beat Notre Dame, which they should do, and if Colorado loses and they get into that Pac-12 game and you beat Washington again, you could be sitting there saying, look, nobody played a harder schedule than we did, and nobody's hotter than we are. You would at least have those two things going for you. That maybe that's enough to counter-argue 3 losses, but it would be tough.
Pat Forde joining me here in the Honda Insider Report from Yahoo Sports. And, USC, we're all expecting them to dismantle Notre Dame and dispatch the Fighting Irish into that offseason at 4-8 with a scandal now on it. You wrote about Brian Kelly and his future. Suss it out for folks who might be a little confused about what Notre Dame is being hit for and how much Brian Kelly might wind up with the mud on him.
Yeah, obviously it's been a terrible season on the field for Notre Dame, 4-7, likely headed to 4-8, one of the 2 worst seasons in the last 52 years there. But then this came out yesterday. The NCAA will vacate 2 seasons worth of victories, including the 12-0 year, 12-1 when they lost to Alabama in the BCS championship game. And the thing at Notre Dame, as we all know, they have always aspired to be the complete program where you can win at the highest level and you can graduate players and you can put them in rigorous majors and make it work academically. And now they're not doing either well, and that comes back to Kelly. This is not a situation he inherited. This isn't somebody else's problem. It's his problem. He is not in any way implicated with the academic scandal, but there are 8 of his players who are. 2 players more significantly than the other 6, but 8 players involved with a trainer who helped do work for them. And, at a school like Notre Dame, which takes its academics super seriously, that's a major problem. So you combine that with the losing, and it's a bad situation. Now, I think there's every reason to believe Brian Kelly will be back if he wants to be back at Notre Dame. So far, he has indicated that he wants to be back. We'll see if this changes anything here in the coming week or 2 when jobs start opening up.
And in that respect, when does the Tom Herman sweepstakes begin?
Yeah, it's begun. It's underway. Behind the scenes, I think, because obviously Charlie Strong is on his way out at Texas. Herman is the odds-on guy there. I would be surprised if that isn't the way that works out. There may be some, and this is part of the problem at Texas, you may get some boosters who are like, well, wait a minute, I can go get Nick Saban. And so you're listening to those guys. You're not going to get Nick Saban. You should go get Tom Herman, and I expect that to get done sooner rather than later.
Then where does Les Miles wind up?
That's a great question. I'm not sure where Les fits into things. There's some people that have said that if Jimbo Fisher goes to LSU, that he would push hard for Florida State. I'm not sure he could get Florida State. If not, I think Purdue might be the fallback, but he might have to slow play Purdue to see what happens elsewhere.
Could Chip Kelly come out? And, obviously you hear the rumors in the National Football League. It's such a dreadful season for Chip sitting there in San Francisco. You hearing any smoke and fire on that front, Pat?
Not really. I think Chip feels like he's kind of done with the college experience unless he comes back in a very, very different place and capacity. I don't see him going back to Oregon. He was very successful there, did a great job. I wouldn't be surprised if they would want him to come back, but he wasn't a guy that loved the whole booster stuff, and other people's involvement, and Phil Knight having on the headphones and hearing the plays in the suite and stuff like that. I just don't think that's his cup of tea. If he can avoid that, he will. 4
p.m. Eastern. Do I need a hug? Yes or no? Saturday.
Probably so. Probably so. I'll give you one if you want. I'm here for you.
Okay, Pat. I might have to reach out for that. Thanks for calling. I appreciate it.
All right,
Love your
Rich,
stuff.
thank you.
Love reading it. Love reading it, Pat. Thanks for coming on. That's Pat Forde, the Honda Insider Report.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.